You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Have you ever had your own shadow predict the weather for you? If so, you're in great company, because today we're going to talk about shadows and Groundhog Day. Welcome to Systematic Ecology, where we're going to discuss not only one of my favorite Bill Murray movies, but also one of my favorite movies of all time, Groundhog Day. We are the priest to the geeks, those not afraid to be called geeks mediators between pop culture and faith. And so today I got some friends with me who we're going to go into a deep dive into everyone's ninth favorite holiday, Groundhog Day, and also the movie. I am Will Rose. I am a Lutheran pastor in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I just got on somebody else's podcast and was able to talk about some recent issues of Thor and Avengers, and we had to put a cap on our time of us talking because we were talking about just these few issues of comics for a long time. And man, I just love comic books and talking about them too. But we're going to shift the attention a little bit from what maybe you wouldn't think is like a geeky topic or like the mainstream pop culture. But man, Groundhog Day is the next holiday on my calendar when I look at it. There are no such thing as Hallmark cards that says Happy Groundhog Day on it that you can give to your friend or neighbor. But there's an awesome movie out there that helps us go into the lore of Groundhog Day. So we're excited to share with you and talk about how much we love this movie. And I have some co-hosts with me. You're going to introduce themselves.
All right. Sounds great. My name is Dan Stoyer, aka Superfan Dan. I'm a home health physical therapist assistant by day and a podcaster by night, as I am the host of Finish Last. And recently I got to play the Uncharted games. And I know that Uncharted movie with Tom Holland's coming out, so I'm really intrigued to see if they do a good job with it or not.
Nice.
I'm kind of nervous, but we'll see, because it's a high bar to uphold with the games. The games do a really good job with the story and the character, and everything they do in those games is just great.
Well, I just learned something new. I saw the trailer for that movie, but I had no idea it was a video game first. So that's okay.
Yeah.
See,
yeah, it's four separate games. So
wow,
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's one of the few times where it's a movie compared to a video game, and the source material is just, I don't see a world where, and this isn't against Tom Holland, but with how good the story is in those video games and how well paced it is and all of those kinds of things, I'm not sure I see a world where that the movie's going to be able to live up to the actual video games.
I don't. I'm holding out hope, but
no,
we'll see.
We'll see.
I am Joe. I am a marketer, broadcaster, podcaster, and I have been geeking out on food-related content as of recent. I spent over a decade as a chef running restaurants and things like that, and so I've been geeking out on different food shows and different things like that, and it's been bringing me back to my roots and love of food and making food and all of those kinds of things.
Fun, because I haven't had dinner yet. So you just saying that is making me even more hungry thinking about the good food out there that I can get after this episode. Cool stuff. And then, is there a way to cook groundhog? Is there a groundhog dish out there?
I can't say as though I've ever made groundhog, though I do know that groundhog stew is in fact a thing.
Okay, see, there you go. Oh, man. Well, as I alluded to, we're going to talk about groundhogs. And I don't know about you, but when you ask people around what their favorite holiday is, you get Christmas, you get Halloween, you get Easter, you might even get Valentine's Day. But I don't know where Groundhog Day falls on your list, guys, but it's pretty far down, except when I'm thinking about this movie. But it does have a tradition, and some of the tradition as preparing for our episode today. Groundhog Day is on February 2nd, and it's this kind of like, it has Pennsylvania German roots of weather predicting animals. You know, it goes back to when it hasn't always been the science of meteorology around. We haven't had those meteorologists who are able to study these, the German model, the European model, the American model, as they predict what kind of front or rain or snow is coming through. So people back in their day, before TV, radio, technology, whatever, they would find superstitions or ways to help them control what's around them. And so one of the weirdest things probably humans have done, they created this lore and myth and story around that if a groundhog came out of their hibernation and checked out to see if their shadow is there or not, would predict whether spring would come early or not. So that's Groundhog Day.
Well,
so good.
You think about it, and so I'm from Pennsylvania, so I grew up with hearing about this and experiencing this and all of that. And you had two general groups of people. You had the people that went for the pomp and circumstance because it was a whole thing. There was a parade. There's like everybody comes together. It's a small town. Punxsutawney is a very small town, and so like this was kind of like the Super Bowl of this town. Like people came from around and tourists, and a lot of shops would make their money for the year over the weekend of Groundhog's Day. And then you had the people who bought a little bit too much into the gimmick. And you could tell because like they were up and they were convinced after this thing was, after like the whole deal was done, that like that was what it was going to be, that like if he saw a shadow, if he didn't see a shadow, that was always the thing. Now here's the thing, right? When you have an event happening in front of a whole group of people where everybody is shining camera lights and camera bulbs and flashes and all of that kind of stuff, what naturally occurs as a result of light being shown on something? A shadow for the thing to see. But c'est la vie, you still, you don't, it's almost like a rite of passage on the East Coast to see Groundhog Day from a very young age. And this movie came out when I was 4. Yeah, I was 4 when this movie came out. So there you go, Will. Go ahead and let that one.
I'll share my story later. I'll share mine later. I'll share my my story of seeing this movie. I was not 4. I was not 4.
But I still remember, like, from a very young age, knowing about this movie and all of that. So.
Yeah, and you could probably psychoanalyze like what humans do in terms of shadows and winter and the seasonal depression and coming out. Like, look, here in North Carolina, we've had a couple weekends of snow. It was fun, but dude, I'm a beach guy. I want summer. I'm already done. They're even like predicting snow for this Saturday was going to impact like church services for me on Sunday or not. Here we go again, the 3rd weekend in a row, and I'm already ready. So I can understand people in the Pennsylvania area or other like cold Germanic lands who are like, I'm ready for this to be over. Can there any sign out there? Is there any sign that would give us hope that spring is coming soon? And so you form it around these rodents, as Phil Connor would call it in the movie, to go from there. So it's pretty fun. It does have, Catholic and Lutheran and Germanic traditions, and I think it's called Candlemas at some point. That's also connected to Christmas and like what's coming up soon. We're in the church season of Epiphany, of what is this light shining or this gift given to us revealing. So that it has some roots there. But of course, every town wants to have its festival to bring in some crowds. My own hometown had the Azalea Festival in the spring. The azaleas start sprouting and they form whole concerts and food trucks around to kind of get people out and about. So this is Groundhog Day is another reason to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm all for a tradition that can hopefully shorten winter. We just had negative 10 degrees out yesterday and snow, and to the point where your face hurts if you're outside too long. So I'm all for that. And what's
So you're
funny
like, wah, Will, you had 1 inch of snow. Wah. You're like,
it's a culture up here. I totally get it. But what's funny is when I was a kid, how I got introduced to Groundhog Day was a Winnie the Pooh episode.
Okay.
Of all things, Winnie the Pooh. And it was Rabbit wanting to start his harvesting or his planting early. So they dressed Piglet into a groundhog. And of course, they cover his eyes because he can't see what's going on. And he goes, "Okay, Piglet, can you see your shadow?" He's like, "I don't think so." Like, "Oh, yay, winter's done." So Rabbit starts planting everything. And of course, the next thing, there's like 5 feet of snow and they all blame Piglet. And then it goes on from there. But
okay, there you go.
But just this movie, the first time I saw it, it was an absolute blast. And actually, the third time I saw it, my sister showed up halfway through the movie. And it was so funny seeing her reaction because she's like, "Dan, why is it always 6 a.m.?" Like she was so confused. And I'm like, "You need to watch from the beginning. It'll make sense." She's like, "Why is it always 6 a.m.? Why is this movie called 6 a.m.?"
Yeah, it's one of those movies where you can't come in late. You got to see from the very beginning. Yeah, as we said, like this Groundhog Day, 1993 movie starring Bill Murray. It wasn't that long ago on social media. I was just having fun and kind of thinking through all the movies that Bill Murray has been in and did this kind of informal poll to ask people what their favorite Bill Murray movie was. And of course, Ghostbusters come up or Caddyshack and what about Bob? But then Groundhog Day was definitely top of the list. And as much as I love Ghostbusters, I think Groundhog Day is my favorite because of what it made me feel. I'll share. I was in college when this movie came out and actually saw it in the theater with my buddies. And I remember seeing this movie and us coming out of this movie being like, wow, it had such an impact. It was almost is analogous to It's a Wonderful Life, right? Where someone examines their life and they have this transformation happen. What do I value in my life? How do I want to live my life? What do I want to do with this precious time that's been given to me? And we came out of that movie going, let's live. And I think what we did was we just like, yay, it's 12 o'clock at night. It's midnight. Let's go get donuts. So we just went to like Krispy Kreme and got hot donuts, I think is what we did. So that's how we lived large when we were in college. We weren't the big partiers. We went to Krispy Kreme. But we were like, let's not go to bed. Let's just keep living. But pretty amazing movie. And guys, I didn't even know that until again examining and studying this movie a little bit. Of course, I know the movie beat for beat and the plot and the comedic genius that it is. But I did not realize, maybe you guys did, but Harold Ramis was the director. Egon from Ghostbusters. He had written other movies too, like Caddyshack and Stripes, and had partnered with Bill Murray in a lot of things. And so he's one of the director and writers on this movie. So of course it makes sense. It has that same kind of Ghostbusters comedy, pauses, life, what's going on. It fits Bill Murray's acting chops right down the line. So that was something I learned today, that Egon from Ghostbusters directed this movie.
Wow. So what a small world. That is interesting. And I don't want to add on to making me feel bad, Will, but I was also for when this movie originally came out. So I got that in common with Joe. But I think I just like this movie a lot because it just showed the cycles that he went through. I mean, initially when this first happened, he was confused. Then he became a jerk and tried to take advantage of people. Then he went through like that short phase where he committed suicide almost every day. And then it followed him wanting to try to help people and just trying to help the guy that was homeless or trying to help the community in general until the end of the movie when everything finally clicks, the snow falls down, and then life moves on. But that really got to me, just saying all this cycles goes. It always makes me wonder if I could redo one day of my life, what day would it be? And I have way too many to choose from. If I'm honest.
One of those. Yeah. It goes through that Kluber-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief. You have denial, then anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And in my work, walking with people in a congregation and stages of life, I see the grief all over the place. And I think a lot of in our pop culture, whether it's WandaVision or Hawkeye or other places, they've leaned into these stages of grief. And I did a whole series on that in our congregation, because in the midst of COVID, in the midst of pandemic, we all were grieving so much, whether it was lost time or lost events or lost literally people through this pandemic, to let people know that the stages of grief isn't necessarily a linear thing, hopping from one thing to the next. Grief comes in waves, and they come at different parts. So yeah, they really did set up these scenes and this transformation of Phil, not Punxsutawney Phil Connor, which that's intentional, right? These stages of grief that he was living through to shake him out of his kind of cynical nature as a weatherman who was a prima donna, who was too important. But it really took this magical, mystical moment that led him through these stages to get to a point where he had to re-examine his life and reevaluate what he truly valued as important.
One of the most interesting things that I find about this movie, the older that I get watching it, I am a card-carrying member of the mental health community. And so to watch something like this made in a time where it was not talked about. If you had mental health issues in our generation as a 90s kid, and I'm sure other generations can speak to this too, but being a kid in the 90s, that wasn't taken seriously. And so to watch this movie that was made in 93, be willing to at least start the conversation of not to be whatever, but we find this movie is funny, right? All three of us would call this a funny movie. This is technically a comedy. Dude kills himself several times in this movie. You know what I mean? He drives a car off a cliff and all of those kinds of things. He
electrocutes himself in a bathtub.
Right.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Right. So, but to see this attempt, I'm of two minds, right? Because I watch this movie and I'm like, man, we have come a long way with at least accepting there to be some kind of conversation, especially within the Christian community, of not just, shoving scripture and choose joy down people's throats. But, at the same token, man, at least they were willing to start that conversation. At least that conversation had to start someplace. You know what I mean? Was it perfect? No. But at least it was willing that somebody was willing to go there and to have part of this conversation,
Yeah, they classify as a kind of fantasy comedy. So you have this kind of magical element, which I find interesting. They never explain why it happened other than just his own life of trying to wake him up from cynicism and complacency. They don't say, oh, there's this wizard over in the corner doing this to him, or explain. I love it that they don't explain other than just him waking him up from complacency and cynicism. And it's funny reading about the history of this movie. You have Danny Rubin, with one of the writers, shared that he was in a movie theater getting ready to watch a movie, and he was reading one of Anne Rice's books on vampires. And as he was reading it, he started thinking about immortality. And he was like, if you had all the time in the world, what would you do with it? If we were limited time, does that make more sense of urgency to live your life to the fullest? Or if you had all the time in the world, would you do whatever you wanted? And then Harold Ramis was a part of it. And he was like, what's the nearest holiday on the calendar that I'm looking at? And he said, oh, Groundhog Day. So they didn't attach it to Christmas or Halloween, or there's what is a holiday nobody ever thinks about? Groundhog Day. And so they wrapped it around the story around that, which I think gives it some more credence, or at least you notice it more. If it's just another Christmas movie, you'd be like, okay, it's just trying to be It's a Wonderful Life or Charlie Brown Christmas, whatever. But it stands out a little more. And so this guy trapped in a time loop, I think you're right, Dan. It's what do I value? What would my day be? If I had a day that I could live over and over again, what would it be? I know mine would be my wife and I honeymooned in Tahiti. And there was a day when we woke up and had a breakfast buffet, and I actually took my surfboard out and surfed a day in Tahiti. And then we came back. It was a beautiful, and I was like, if I could have one day that I lived over, that would be the day. But then I started thinking about, what about my kids? Or what about what would I be how long would that be where we'd be like, oh, I'm being driven mad? And people in our lives, there are oftentimes we feel trapped in the same day, in the same routine. Every day I wake up and I go to work, I clock in, I do these things. What brings us joy? What do we value? This time loop of life during the shutdown of the pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, but in terms of like those initial few months of this thing, we were like, oh, I can't tell one day from next. The same thing's happening every day. What am I doing with my life? Those questions are huge, and it takes something like this kind of storytelling to help us reevaluate our own lives and vocation and calling.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like reflecting on your past. Yeah, you wish you could go back in time and change things, but then if you did, it could change how you are today. Or the reason why that might have happened is God had that plan for you to become the man or woman that you're supposed to be. And I don't know why I just saw this now, but it reminds me of the Doctor Strange What If episode.
Yeah.
Which is still my favorite episode because he tries constantly to change something that happened, and he just beats himself over to the point of where he becomes supreme. The Doctor
very
Strange.
Reminiscent of Phil Connors trying to help the homeless gentleman. He could not stop him from dying.
Yeah,
and that
really
poignant
good
moment of what the nurse going, sometime it's just their time. And he was like, not on my watch. So that very good pull there, because that's what it brought that image. There's so many things in this movie that are so great, but that's one that was so meaningful about examining what you could or couldn't do, what you control and what you can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for me, and the way my brain processes this, looking past the initial comedy of it all, my brain goes to, what would we've all had our moments of thinking like, what if we were God? You know what I mean? I understand we're on a Christian show, and that can almost sound nigh heretical, but like we've all had those moments of thinking, if we were the one that was in control, what would we do different? What would be, or if, like we were talking about before, if we could live over a day, what would that day be? A lot of times people will go to a less positive day to try and redeem that day and all of those kinds of things. But what do you
you make me sound selfish. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to improve anything. I just want to surf and have a breakfast buffet. But you're right. Like my mind psychoanalyzed me now. Like, oh, I would go for the great day. But yeah, there's most more meaningful days you could go back to and say, I'm going to change this and do it. But yeah, you're right, Joe. Like that, what would we do if we had that godlike power or not? Right.
But what does that change? You know what I mean? Like if you take that bad day out, if you take that period of your life out, or if you take something and you change it like that, what does that change as far as the type of person that you've become, your relationship with God, all of those kinds of things? Not to go, too far down the whole butterfly effect thing, but at the same token, like all of these things, both good and bad, make up the sum total of who we are. And so what happens when you start to pull out those pieces? And what kind of effect does that have? You know what I mean? Yes, there's the inherent idea that if I could live the same day over and over again, there's an inherent immortality to that. And we see that to be part of the movie and all of those kinds of things. And
he even tells her, I think I'm a god. Doesn't he even say that out loud?
Yeah.
To
it wouldn't surprise me.
He in the movie, he was like, I'm a god. She's like, oh gosh, what are you talking about? He's like, no. I watched this. And so he plays with the idea. They name it. They name it.
It's crazy because she actually believes him too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you wonder what kind of, I think that's one of the, it's so fascinating to see somebody try and make some kind of depiction of what kind of effect that would have on the human psyche to go through what, like that reconciliation process of, okay, so we all wish sometimes that the gloves were off, right? That we could do whatever we wanted to do. But what is the psychological effect of all of that and kind of being your own master in that regard? You know what I mean?
Yeah. As you said, it deals with some very heavy topics, and it is a comedy, and that comedy almost disarms you so that it's more palatable. I think like horror or sci-fi, they have their purpose to help you deal and cope and imagine and think through things. Comedies do the same. They're disarming, but good comedies also challenge you and to think about, what you would do in that situation as well. So very, very deep issues and thoughts, and what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of love and death, or what would you do with those days? This comedy makes it more palatable and disarming, that you can digest it a little easier, going back to your kind of food analogy. And man, like you said, like nothing matters. He was sitting there in that restaurant, one of the greatest oh gosh, he was sitting there eating whatever he wanted to eat. He didn't care because he was going to leave the next day. He was eating tons of cake. He was smoking cigarettes. He was drinking tons of coffee. He was like, nothing matters, because there's this nihilism of like, well, I'm just going to live the same day every day, and it's not going to affect my heart or health or whether I live or die the next day, because I'm just going to relive this over again. So why not enjoy this entire cake on its own?
Right.
Yeah, and he did that in positive and negative ways. He would do like, eat as much cake, or one of my favorite parts is when he's doing the news broadcast and he's totally being a jerk to whoever was there. Like, this is dumb. This is stupid. Why are we here? But then he also did things like play the piano with the same teacher. And then by the end of the movie, he's like, Spock. So he's like, how long have you been playing? Oh, I just picked it up yesterday.
And the teacher's like, that's my student. Then his relationships. Again, we can't detach this it is about him and this day, but it's all connected to the web of relationships that he's a part of. So not only Rita, but also Chris Elliott's character, the cameraman Larry, and connected to the homeless guy, and even the bed and breakfast he's staying in, his reaction to her. And then you have one of my all-time favorite characters of all time, Ned Ryerson, the insurance salesman. Phil is Ned. And then like three days in, he's punching him in the face. But by the end of the movie, he's like, yeah, I bought an entire life insurance, changed the man's life by giving him the business. And that kind of transformation that happens with all these relationships that he's doing. And yeah, the first time he does this broadcast, he does it in a cynical, dismissive way. But by the end, people gathered around to hear this speech like he's reading Shakespeare. And Rita's like, where did that come from? He's like, he's lived it. It becomes this poetic exposition of what he's doing. And he's like, yeah, I've lived this, and I'm just going to accept it. Move into that acceptance of what his life is from there on out.
Oh, so true. And I love that he kind of goes through the pattern of he hates being there, and at the end of the movie, he actually wants to live there.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind, because sometimes we think that we're in a place where God doesn't want us, and we could be in the exact place God wants us to be. It's just that we need a different perspective on it. We got to sometimes take a step back and be like, oh, maybe this is the place for me. I just had to look at it from a different angle. So that part always gets me too.
Yeah, and his transformation isn't just him accepting on his own, but the relationships he is in. So we do this thing called life. We do this thing called faith in community with one another, so that we can hold each other accountable. There are people in my lives, friends in my life, that they're like, well, I need to challenge you on this. You need to have a personality check. You need to check your grief, check your pain, your anger, your road rage, whatever it is that you're going through. Let's talk through this. So that perspective doesn't come just on me magically thinking up on my own, but in my relationships with other and the communities that I'm a part of.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you can see how just that slight perspective difference can change everything. And that hits home with me, because like I said, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I did everything in my power. I've lived up in your neck of the woods before, Dan. I was in Minnesota for like 5 years, and
oh yeah,
I've lived all over God's green earth, because I did everything in my power to leave Pennsylvania, because I wanted nothing to do with this state. And until I ended up back here a couple of years ago, but that's when I reconnected with my now wife, and things have taken the turn that they have in a positive way. But that all, like, leading up to that, I'm like, really? Like, you're going to ask me to go to my Nineveh and come back to these stomping grounds and all of those kinds of things?
Yeah, that the journey, right? And I think that character transformation, there are some, myself included, as I get older, it's easier to get more cynical. It's easier to get more jaded. It's easier to see things from like, what's the point? Some things never change. But this move that Phil had from cynicism to beauty, cynicism, self-importance to loving those around him in a deeper way. That's the move we're called to do. And it's hard. It's not easy. And then the movie doesn't make it look like, it's just one big happy thing. It took some hard times along the way to chip off that armor, or to move that movement from cynicism, nihilism, nothing matters, to life is beautiful. And I want to make the most of the time that I'm given on earth.
Yeah, I've often said that humans aren't capable of making significant change on their own, that humans are humans. Like, that's just is what it is. So it's interesting to see, in this case, it's, the depiction of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, right? There's no specific explanation. It's just kind of life has done this to him, sort of thing. And so, while there's some ideology there that, doesn't necessarily jive, I can still appreciate the story of somebody who has a forced perspective change. You know what I mean? And I think that for life, you can look at some of the most beautiful moments where you're forced out of your own perspective into a perspective that you wouldn't naturally necessarily land in.
Yeah, it's that's something outside yourself that draws that, and we call that God. They never name it or explain it in the movie, but there's definitely something outside beyond himself that has happened to him, and it's not just him or somebody else forcing him to do it. There's been some sort of divine hand that has outside of himself to draw him into this journey.
I mean, like we've been saying, we don't know why this happened to him in the movie. I mean, kind of funny if it was the groundhog controlling everything, but I kind of like that it's not, and it's just we don't know. But I thought it was interesting that you brought up, Will, the point where he tells Rita, "I'm a god," and then she ends up believing him, and then still the next day he wakes up 6 a.m. and it's the same day. And it's just kind of crazy, and how it didn't reset until everything was set in place. Not just one part of his life, but every part of his life. And I think sometimes as a Christian, we focus too much on one aspect of our life that we need to improve on, when we really need to work on multiple things at the same time to complete the whole picture, and not just be partially human, but fully human in what we're trying to pursue.
Yeah, that well balanced. Like, because you feel that frustration with him. Like he's made progress with her in his relationship, but the next day he has to start all over again. So you're like, and there's definitely days when I'm like, I have to wake up and start all over again. What's really going on? We ask those questions, but you feel that frustration. But when he eventually relaxes and leans into this is his reality, and he's going to make the best of it, whether it's learning the piano or ice sculpting or whatever he needs to do, that's when the change happens. And you feel that joy when something different happens. He's like, whoa, something different just happened. And the next day he's like, oh my gosh. And I have to ask you guys, like, whenever you hear Sonny and Cher, I Got You, Babe, what do you think of?
This movie, absolutely.
This freaking movie. I can't hear it without thinking of this movie. Yeah, I don't know if Cher gets royalties off this or not, but That would be pretty fun if you set your own alarm to "I got you, babe," and wake up every morning that way.
I guess. Yeah.
Is there a scene? Is there a scene that is your favorite or something that stands out? I mean, the whole movie, just the progress of it. Is there like a favorite part in the movie whenever it comes on? You're like, yeah, that's just one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I mean, there's a couple. I mean, in any movie I always like 2 or 3. So of course I like the one where he actually steals the groundhog and goes in the truck and goes, "All right, here we go." And then he goes down, crashes, and then Rita's like, "Maybe they're still okay," and just blows up. But just the fact that they think he's gonna be okay still is what gets me every time. And then of course the scene with the piano teacher where he keeps getting better and better for no explicit reason besides the fact he's getting a lesson over and over again is pretty funny to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious when he's in the diner, because you see his progression towards thinking that he's like immortal and all of those kinds of things, and I'm like, that's probably the most human that we've seen this character, because how many of us, if we knew that we had the keys to the kingdom, would just, do you know what I mean? Like that, start making those decisions and all of those kinds of things, especially if that's not something that you're particularly passionate about or is on your heart or something along those lines. If you don't have any anchor towards making the right choices, what are you going to do? You're going to make the wrong choices and all of those kinds of things. And so to me, that's probably one of the most impactful, but also some of the funniest, because you watch this person go through. And as a kid, I even found this hilarious, and I've realized that it's because you can relate with humanity. When human sees a humane or like a very human response, it's engaging.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another one of my favorite shows of the last few years was The Good Place, and I don't know if you guys watched that show. At first, I was like, I'm not going to watch that show. It's them doing. I'll get too judgy. I know I'll get judgy. Like doing religion or faith and stuff. But my daughter was like, "No, Dad, there's a twist. You need to watch this. It's really good." And we just fell right into it. And again, they play with that philosophical theme of what's your anchor. If you had just endless amount of time, would it be as special or not? But since we have a short amount of time, a fixated amount of time, that we're not immortal, there is a sense of mortality to life. What does that add to the sense of our lives? And so, you can speculate all the time God's purpose in terms of death, pain, power, mortality, what we're anchored to, but like in terms of what is it that helps us grow into the people that God calls us to be, and that sense of urgency of what do I do with my life in this time now, which I think this movie does a great job doing. Like I said, when we finished watching this movie, a bunch of my buddies were like, man, where do I want to, it's almost apocalyptic in a sense that it reveals something that says, oh, where do I want to place my trust? Where do I want to place where the object of my affection, my love? Is it me? Is it the food? Is it money? Is it power? Is it fame? Or is it the relationships that's been entrusted to me?
Yeah, I'm glad that you keep bringing up the relational aspect of it, because, yes, it is ultimately about him and how he, his personality and things like that. But reconciling the different relationships that we have it's very important to overall overall well-being. And I mean that in a Christian sense and in a person sense, you know what I mean? Because I think that there's non-Christians that would agree all the same that the emotional health of the relationships around us matters. And it's usually indicative of the type of person that you are and the type of energy that you put out and, all of those kinds of things. And so it's interesting that you almost are watching these relationships as the barometer for how he is as a person and who he is as a person and the effects that all of this is taking on him, you know?
Yeah, barometer or thermometer is getting colder. Is our shadows? Yeah, what's the temperature of these relationships going on in this deep winter? Whether you like snow or not, we know our beloved co-host Joshua hates snow, but like in terms of the imagery of weather and relationships, cold versus hot versus all that, it all comes into play there. And I mean, truth is truth, love is love. In terms of these universal truths of human nature and relationships, everyone can relate to what's happening and this progression and transformation in his character.
Yeah, I mean, far as relationships go, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Will, when you said this kind of has it's a wonderful life effect, and that one person has that much impact on their community around them in a positive or a negative aspect, where, well, it's just another day, this is boring, let's get over with, or what can we make most out of this day, and how can you help make that day even better? So, I mean, just seeing that transformation throughout the movie was a lot of fun, and also reflected on how we can be in our communities as well.
Yeah, I think, you have the two ends of the spectrum. One is like the nihilism of like nothing matters, whatever I do doesn't count because we just live in a universe of chaos and chance or whatever. And the other end is like every single choice matters, and you become paralyzed. You're like, if I use my turn signal or not, I could unravel the fabric of the universe. Like you could also paralyze yourself by the decisions you make. So there's a balance in there of like, yeah, I know that I'm held by the embrace of a loving, grace-filled God. But also my actions and behavior and how I treat myself and others matters too.
Right.
What you do matter. Your life matters. The decisions and choices you make do matter. But I'm also a part of something larger than myself. So that kind of balance, which is why we do it in community, and we hold each other accountable to that. When I'm too unbalanced or go one direction, my brothers and sisters can help me, draw me in a new direction. Joe, you were going to talk a little bit about kind of this in terms of like a world with no rules and the hinges were broken off. What are some of your reflections there when it comes to that? Because that's a good one.
Yeah, so that's and what you just said is a perfect segue into that mode of thinking where we see here where the balances are off, right? The gloves are off. And as humans, how many of us have had the thoughts of, I wish I was a robot so that way I didn't have to make the decisions and all of those kinds of things. Or I just wish that I didn't have to play by the rules. I wish I didn't have this body. I wish I didn't have these limitations and all of those kinds of things. Well, it's the whole idea of you be careful what you wish for because you just might get it sort of thing. And what does that do to your ultimate mentality and the way that you interact with this world and all of that if all of those rules were gone, all of the guardrails were gone? You know what I mean? I have the personal opinion that I think every person is inherently born with a sense of morality. Because morality has existed, because good and evil has existed, that humans kind of instinctually know, even if they aren't Christian, that they know that they've wronged somebody or that something is askew, or like this inherent sense of justice and those kinds of things. If nothing has consequence, then where is the justice? If nothing has consequence, then where are the lines? Where are the guardrails? Where is everything in place that kind of gives the universe and life purpose and meaning and all of that? And if left in your own hands, what do you do with the fact that you are, if you can do whatever you want and still wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning and all of those kinds of things, in all standards of measurement, yeah, that would make sense. If you're not looking at this from a Christian perspective, and you are reliving the same day over and over again, what would your first inherent idea be? That you are a god in that regard. Well, what do you do with that? And I think that it's almost Greek tragedy in a sense when you look at the way that this plays out, because you have the Greek gods, you have these other depictions of gods that are just, they spend their life trying to entertain themselves or trying to bring purpose and meaning and all of those kinds of things while indulging all of these practices and all of that kind of stuff, that you have to hit this point of realizing that all of the guardrails, all of the asterisks, and all of that kind of stuff, that's what keeps me on the straight and narrow. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are some days where I wake up angry the fact that I'm a human. I wake up angry about the fact that I am part of a fallen creation, that I myself am fallen, all of these things. But at the end of the day, if you take all of that away, you're left with something way, way worse. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about this movie is it's daring to go to that place of asking those questions, especially for people like myself that have death phobia, that have that struggle with nihilism, that struggle with all like these thoughts of, well, what in the wide world of sports is the point? What is the point of all of this? You know what I mean? And willing to ask those questions and then depict what it would be like if all of those things changed.
Right. There's a moral arc to the universe, and it bends towards justice. It bends towards love. And so, yeah, if you know, I can think we're coming off Martin Luther King weekend. We're heading into Black History Month. I think of someone like Martin Luther King who was wrestling with justice and racial justice. If there wasn't a moral arc to the universe, then what would it just power taking over power, a replacement of power? Or is there like this kind of way of a trajectory that we're being called to as an example that Christ led us down the road? So I think, yeah, what is the moral arc that the universe is bending to? If there is none, you know, why do any of this? But if there is, I want to be a part of that, and I want to align my life with where that trajectory is going to. Yeah, and I heard this one analogy once that was saying that they did this experiment with like kids in preschool, that when they were out in the playground, the kids, when they didn't have a fence, they would huddle real close with each other in the middle of the playground and not explore because they didn't feel safe. But as soon as they put the fence up around the playground, they were able to go freely around the playground because it actually had barriers that allowed them to free and move, and they felt space. And so we often see the Ten Commandments as these kind of like rules to box us in, to keep us down and limit our lives. But really they're there as my Hebrew friends would say, Jewish friends would say, they're gifts. They're gifts given by God to give us boundaries so that we can actually live life to its fullest and go beyond just our little tiny circles, but explore life even deeper with these gifts of the commandments and the law and the Torah that's been given by God.
I look at.
You go, Joe. Okay. I am thankful those boundaries are in place, and if there were no consequences out there, then it'd be like living as a character in Grand Theft Auto. That would be an absolute nightmare.
Great pull. Yeah.
And I like that you put out, Will, that so many people see these rules as binding, or not like binding, but they constrict you. And in reality, they're there to make sure we live that right life that God wants us to live, but also that we can help others and be along that mindset. And with what Joe said, with being born with morality, watching my nephews grow up, they definitely know right and wrong before anything happens. Like when they're 2, they'll do something and they'll look at you while they're doing it. And they're like, and they know not to do it, but they do it anyway. And you don't have to teach any of them the word no. They just say it instantaneously. No, I don't want veggies. No.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and the way the movie eventually wraps around is the climax, the salvation, the transformation that happens is he's given a new day, a different day. And so, man, we think about our lives and what's the new day ahead of us, and eventually goes back around and tie it to Easter. Yeah, the holiday of Groundhog Day, again, you're not going to have any like, other than in Punxsutawney, you're not going to have these big festivals or Hallmark cards celebrating Groundhog Day, but bringing it back to Easter, this kind of new day, a new day of creation, this often in the Christian tradition called the eighth day of creation. You have the 7 days. Here's a brand new day, a new creation being birthed for us. So for Phil Connors, he's given a new day, and each day we're given a new day. And then how do we use it and moving forward?
I approached this movie with, I hadn't seen this movie in a couple of years, and I watched it in preparation for the episode, and it was an interesting thing because I had an opportunity for a while to kind of live my own, no, I wasn't running around like a character in GTA or anything like that, but I made my own rules. I worked for myself. I had my own business. I had more money than I should have, and an empire that I answered in my own life to really nobody in a lot of regards, until I got sick and started down the road that ended up with me at the cross. And I used to think that, that this whole thing was all just rules. It was all just man-made rules to keep people in line, and that were used by powerful men to subjectify certain groups of people and all of those kinds of things. And sure, humanity is broken. Yeah, sure, maybe we can point to historical points where Christianity was used as a controlling mechanism and all of those kinds of things. Everything can be used in a negative way by a broken creation. But at the end of the day, I have to look back objectively at the last couple of years and look at my life since I've been on the quote unquote straight and narrow, when I'm living my life with a purpose and with rules and with regulations and all of those kinds of things, kind of closer to coloring within the lines, if you will. And it's just, I can honestly say, yeah, there are days where life sucks, meaningless. It's all like I vibe with that some days. I really do.
That's biblical. That's biblical too.
Yeah.
But that question's in there.
But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have it any other way, because I wouldn't have my family. I wouldn't have my wife. I wouldn't have my life. I wouldn't have these things that, come along with the rules and regulations and the blessing of those things.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So, so if you feel like you're in a routine or every day is the same, if you feel like you're caught up in a time loop and you can't get out of it, we like to tie in scripture. So from Luke chapter 12, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, or what you will eat, or about your body, or what you will wear. For life is more important than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither toil nor sow nor reap, yet they have a storehouse, and yet they don't have a storehouse, and God feeds them. How much more value are you than the birds? How can you, by worrying a single hour, say to yourself, what can I add to my life? If you're not able to do the small things, then why worry about the rest? So consider the lilies, how they grow, and how they neither toil nor spin. For I tell you that even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed as one of them." It's not saying that you won't have worries, that life's going to be a cupcake, or that something's going to happen and you'll live heavily ever after. But yeah, what do we do with the time we're given, and how can worrying about the things we can't control how is that going to add any more to your life? And I like that aspect. Often we hear consider the lilies, but remember people talk about consider the ravens. I think that'd be a great band name or like a book or a t-shirt. Consider the ravens. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like Odin's ravens? Like, no, a parable from Jesus. That's what we're talking about. He said, watch those ravens and see how they live. And so we hope that this Groundhog Day, that you'll be able to rewatch this movie. I'm sure it might be on a TNT or a network, or pull it up on around Groundhog Day, and you can look at it through a different lens and kind of reevaluate your life and your time and what you have going on, and how we can all grow in our lives and grow in the relationships that are entrusted to us.
All right, fantastic. Ready for the wrap up?
Let's wrap it up.
Okay, let's wrap it up here, guys. We'll start off with Joe. Any recommendations you have for our audience here on anything in particular?
Yeah, I would recommend, this movie, because this is, everybody has to experience this ridiculousness at least once. But outside of the movie, I have been binging on, we did an episode a little while ago on Ultraman. And it sent me down this rabbit hole of different tokusatsu shows and things like that. Especially if you're a 90s era kid and stuff like that, definitely take a look at some of this stuff like Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, Ultraman, all of those kinds of things.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, man, there's some good TV out there right now. Like some of it, can be scandalous to admit to as a pastor on that. But man, there's some stuff on HBO right now that is so freaking good. And then I was a little slow on Book of Boba Fett, but the latest episode, episode 5, chapter 5, was just everything I wanted in Star Wars. Man, it was just so good the way they tied a lot of things in and had a blast with that. So yeah, and I'll do a little plug too, like in terms of I actually have a short little book on Amazon called I Sure Am Gonna Miss That Guy. And it's really we talked about Easter here and holidays, that I have compiled my Holy Week sermon from Good Friday, Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, into Easter into a little book with some stories that I share with my congregation. So if you want to go to Amazon and grab that, but it made me think through kind of the center and core of the Christian faith, which is Easter and the chief holiday. Christmas is a lot of people's favorite holiday because you get a lot of gifts. But in terms of the Christian narrative, Easter, there wouldn't be a Christian faith without Easter. And so I always say Easter is my favorite holiday because of that. So if you're interested in my kind of take on that or my preaching style, you can grab that book really cheap on Amazon.
Awesome. Nice plug in there. I like it. For me, I'm going to recommend another Bill Murray movie because I do like a Groundhog Day, but my favorite is What About Bob? And long story short, it's basically Bill Murray as Bob Wiley, who is just a patient who can't get over himself. He goes sees a psychologist almost every day or every week, and he meets this doctor. They meet one time, and the doctor goes on vacation. Bob follows him, and by the end of the movie, they switch roles, and just that journey is hilarious. So I would highly recommend watching that movie. You will laugh your head off, guaranteed. And before we go here, just if you want to connect with any of us, we'll share that information right now. So Joe, where can people find and connect with you?
Outside of SG, y'all can find me at buddywalkwithjesus.com. Buddy Walk with Jesus is one of the shows that I host along with Kingdom on the Road. You can find me on Facebook and anywhere that you can find podcasts, both of those.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well. it's good to be a part of this podcast. And I want to recommend or just encourage you that we have a really cool group on Facebook, Priest to the Geeks, that has different folks that are chiming in and asking questions and sharing memes. And part of our goal of this is to kind of expand and invite people in and grow a community where we can nerd out and geek out, but also kind of process all this stuff together. So really cool group. And if you have a suggestion of what a topic or something we haven't covered yet, or have a hot take on something we shared, then share it with us. Let us know.
I agree. You guys in our community are so awesome. We're so thankful for each and every one of you. And if God willing, if it keeps growing, that just excites me. That is great. As far as me, outside of Systematic Geekology, you can find me on Facebook, finish at www.facebook.com/finishlastpodcast, Instagram, finishlastpodcast, and Twitter at finishlastpod, as well as my email, finishlastpodcast@gmail.com. And like Will said, you can connect with us on our Facebook group, or you can go to our website in the description to let us know what you have been geeking out on and what we should be geeking out on as well. Because remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.